Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Tuesday night officiating Zoomcast series. My name is Scott Zelkin. I am the manager of the Junior Officiating Development Program for USA Hockey, and I'll be your host this evening as we talk about Hockey IQ and how that can benefit us as officials. And joining us this evening as part of our panel are two of USA Hockey's finest on the officiating end of things. We have Kelly Cooke and JB Olson. Kelly hails from Massachusetts, and she is a 15-year official within USA Hockey. She has a tremendous amount of experience both at the amateur levels as well as the collegiate and international levels. Kelly has been a referee in multiple Frozen Fours on the female side, as well as Division III college hockey, and she has also officiated numerous IIHF women's tournaments. She was selected for the 2021 IIHF Women's Worlds, which, as we all know, thanks to our global pandemic, never happened. And she has been fortunate enough to be nominated and selected to go to Halifax and Truro, Nova Scotia in a few weeks to represent USA Hockey at the Women's Worlds this year. So Kelly, welcome to the Zoom class. We're glad to have you. Our second panelist is JB Olson. JB has more than doubled Kelly in terms of his experience within USA Hockey. He's been registered with USA Hockey as an official for, well, let's just call it, he's into his fourth decade with USA Hockey. In addition to that, he worked college hockey in the WCHA for 11 years and was a licensed IIHF official for 10 years, representing USA Hockey on the international stage. Additionally, and what we all think makes JB a really good guest here for this evening is he's a USA Hockey registered youth coach and coaches quite a bit in his home state in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So JB, welcome to the Zoomcast. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks, Scott.
As we do with all of our Zoomcasts, the first thing we're going to do is, as we begin talking about Hockey IQ, is throw up a few poll questions, kind of get a sense of, where you or the audience are at with your thoughts about this. What is Hockey IQ? Why is it important? And all of those things. And then we'll kind of get into a discussion in our topics. So as we always do, I'm going to throw this up here. We've got 3 questions for you this evening. How strongly do you agree with the following statement? A team's tactics and game plan don't play any part in how I officiate a game. Do you strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree? Or you know what, I'm not a hockey official, so I'm not going to have an opinion. Our second question, true or false? Being able to anticipate situations before they happen will aid officials in how they involve themselves in the game. That's true or false. And then finally, being able to anticipate situations before they happen. Oh, well, looks like we had a little bit of an error here, but we'll throw that up as well. How they involve themselves in the game. Do you strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or somewhat strongly disagree? So we're going to let the votes come in. Give it about 15, 20 more seconds. We'll see where we're at. And then we'll begin. Okay, so you should all see the results on your screen. How strongly do you agree with the statement? A team's tactics and game plan don't play any part in how I officiate. We have our winner here is that you all somewhat disagree. 40% of you somewhat disagree, while some of you, another 33% strongly disagree. And then there's 27% either agree or strongly agree with that. The next one, being able to anticipate situations before they happen will aid officials in how they involve themselves in the game. Almost unanimous, true. Being able to anticipate situations is going to help. And then if you all said true, that means the majority of you are going to strongly agree with a very similar statement. So, many of the things we talk about when it comes to Hockey IQ are, revolve around how do we do our job on the ice? What are we talking about and things like that? So, JB, as a coach, when we talk about hockey IQ, what does that mean to you, and why is it important?
Hockey IQ is kind of one of those things that it's hard to put your hands around. You can test how fast a skater is, how fast official is, but are they making the right choices, getting to the areas, anticipating where pucks are going to go, anticipating plays, reading off each other. It's hockey IQ to me is also, like they say, it's hockey sense. Okay, it's hard to put that in a box and wrap a bow around it and give it to somebody. And I think it's very analogous with officiating. Do they have good judgment? That comes from hockey sense, managing a game. So I think it's one of the harder things to teach. And but it was primarily it's about decision making, going to areas of high probability, making the right reads in the right place.
In Kelly, so JB talked about hockey sense. When I say to you, what's hockey IQ and why is it important? Very similar question. How do you answer that question? Because it is something that isn't black and white as a lot of officiating, but how do you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my biggest thing I would say is anticipation. I would kind of say hockey IQ is smart. Does the player or the official, make the smart play? Are they getting to the places that they're supposed to be ahead of the players, and kind of, as an official, knowing where you should be standing so that you can make that call. So I think, hockey IQ, it might be a little different as a player versus an official, but I think it really, a lot of it comes down to anticipation. And, are you recognizing something that's developing in that game, and are you able to read off of that and kind of put yourself in the best position to see what's going to happen?
So a lot of that plays into anticipation and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about that, if I said the statement, knowing what teams do is important to make us better, is that true? Like, is that something, when teams are doing different things, JB, when teams play a certain way, if we can understand that, is that important? So the first question on the poll question was, is hockey IQ important? Does understanding those things, it says a team's tactic and game plan play a part in how I officiated a game. Everybody kind of agreed that understanding teams' tactics and things like that are important. Can you expand on that a little bit?
When I saw the results, I was surprised. Surprised, but not surprised that most strongly or disagreed. And I think that comes a little bit from officiating, where like, what, I'm gonna call it as I see it. Okay. Or, our job is to be unbiased and impartial. And I applaud everybody for that. But I think what we're talking about here is not just, okay, do I call a trip when I see it? We're talking about the good officials that I know are ones who see things before they happen. It's like they can predict the future based on what they're taking in from the game. So that anticipate to me is so much better than always reading and reacting to what's going on, because that's a little behind, what's going on. I read the play, now I got to react. Where anticipate, I'm getting to the net, I'm getting to this area, I'm getting a sight line, okay, because I could see what teams are trying to do, and it's helping me predict what they're going to do, so I'm not caught off guard. I'm always kind of in their head and game planning with them and knowing what their options are, so I can anticipate when a call may happen or a goal may happen. So that's the thing that I think is so important with having hockey IQ as an official.
So Alex Klein mentions, watching high penalty area or a 2-on-1, getting in position for a goal, or being able to expect that maybe there's going to be on a shot on net, right? That's kind of what you're talking about to a certain extent.
Yep.
Is that right?
For sure, for sure.
And so then, you know, Kelly, if I say that and we talk about that and being able to look at those things and position ourselves and all of those things, right? You know, different officiating coaches or different people will talk about the game from 30,000 feet and also from a granular level, and being able to understand. And I think when we talk with officials that are working within our program and kind of some of the better amateur officials as they move up the ladder, you know, you have to understand not only what a team's doing, but how your actions affect the rest of the game. And so that's what we might call a 30,000 foot level versus a trip is a trip. And I'm going to call that trip as a very granular level. Can you expand a little bit on the differences and why those are important and why understanding those are important?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, you know, you kind of have to have both of those viewpoints when you're officiating. You know, if you have a game that might be a team that might be play rough than, you know, their opponent who might be more skilled and fast, you know, you kind of have to read off of that. And are you going to let that team, you know, take advantage of the other team, or are you basically going to, you know, call the trip that you see? Or are you going to, you know, let them play? So, you know, I think that it's important to take both, you know, viewpoints so that you can, you know, let the teams play how they want to play and have a good game, but also make sure that you're making the calls that you should be making according to the rule book. So I think that kind of goes back to not just hockey IQ, but also having a feel for the game and kind of, you know, how each game, it might be different than the next game that you're going to have, but it's kind of up to you to manage that, both from the 30,000 foot view and also from, you know, you're in charge of that specific game on that very day.
No, for sure. And so what you can see on the screen here by me is understanding the game, how the players are playing, and how our actions affect the game. I think there's really, and as we continue to talk here, there's kind of two directions we need to go, because they fit very well together in terms of hockey IQ. So, you know, here's a question for you, JB. How can officials prepare for a game in advance with hockey IQ in mind? Like, if we know there's different things and different facets to hockey IQ, let's try and put our finger a little bit on preparation before the game. When an official just first gets that assignment to the time they drop the puck, how can they prepare for that game?
Well, think of it, for the most basic thing that you can do to prepare is everything's online nowadays. So whatever league you're working, whether it's your local, you know, squirt league up to the higher levels, if you have an idea where they are in the standings and have they played each other, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to find that information. And I think that's important because, you know, something may be on the line that night, you know, they're jockeying for position, you know, or, hey, we've got one team who's scored 54 goals and given up 3 so far in league play, and the other team is about the opposite. You know, I would mentally prepare differently for that, because I want to see, okay, you know, the team that is not a goal scoring team, how are they going to react to getting 6 quick goals put on them or something along those lines? So I think that's one basic thing that we could do. And then taking it from there, you know, I think YouTube, there's so many videos on YouTube nowadays that are talking about hockey at that 30,000 foot level, and we can learn from that. You know, so if you want to self-educate yourself and you want to learn how the game is changing, how coaching is changing, and the tactics are changing, you can find just a wealth of information on YouTube, and, you know, go down a rabbit hole one day and start listening and learning and incorporating that into your mindset.
Whoops. So Kelly, anything you want to add to that, or you know, how would you answer that question? How can you prepare in advance with hockey IQ in mind?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that sentiment. I look at box scores to see both who wins and also, what kind of penalties these teams are taking. Just so, if I'm not familiar with a team, I can kind of gain a sense of how they play and, what their strengths and weaknesses might be before, I'm having to officiate their game. So, other than kind of doing your homework to make sure that you can prepare mentally, I think just as JB said, watching hockey. I think that you can learn so much from watching, the NHL and the American League and all the games that are televised on TV now, just watching those officials and kind of, where their positioning is and what they're doing and how they're managing the game. So, that's definitely something that I think it might help you with a specific game, but I think it definitely helps in general with hockey IQ and kind of preparing on an everyday basis.
And to continue on that, and certainly, we may have officials that are in the audience or people that are going to watch this later on the archived USA Hockey Zoomcast page, that not only are working higher levels, but we might have officials that are working very much at the grassroots level, at the U14 level or the U16 level or the U12 level. And, Ben asked a question here, what is something specific that good officials should be looking for in a team system? And even, JB, at the lower levels, teams have systems now. So, Kelly, what are some things that maybe even our grassroots officials should be looking for when they get on the ice or notice in the first few minutes of a game? What are some things they may look for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at any level, you can kind of see how a team's playing, right? Is a team going to dump and chase? Is that how they're going to play their game? And if that's the case, you might have to kind of figure out where you're going to be skating up and down the ice so that you don't get in the way. Is a team going to cycle repeatedly to kind of pin their opponent into the zone? If that's the case, you might want to make sure that you're, on the opposite side of the ice from where that cycle is occurring, just so that you aren't in the way and you have the best vantage point. So kind of, I guess, picking up on those clues of how a team might play in terms of their forecheck and what they're doing in the zone can definitely help you be in the right position.
Right. And so JB, I mean, we're building off of things that, and I say this every time I'm in this chair for the Zoomcasts. I mean, we've now got an archive on communication, on positioning, on judgment, on all of those things. Hockey IQ fits in. Kelly just talked about knowing where to position ourselves if a team's cycling, right? So those things are important. And if you can recognize that, normally we're going to tell an official when the puck's down low, for example, and they're cycling, if you look in the manual, guys, for those of you in the audience, USA Hockey's manuals are going to tell you where to stand in the corner. In whether you're in the 2 official system and the 3 official system or the 4 official system. However, if the team's cycling, we're going to have to adjust, right, JB?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about on the flip side. Okay, let's say you got this mismatched team, and one team's idea of breaking the puck out is slap shot off the glass each time. Being aware of that's a little self-preservation too. There's some lower levels in the grassroots area where that's their idea of breaking the puck out. So, identifying things like that. But I see one question here, should you ask the coach if these teams have played each? Absolutely. Part of your pregame repertoire, you should be introducing yourself to the coaches before the game. Hey, how's it going? And have you guys played each other? That's easy homework to gather there to see how the game has gone. And they may offer up something that'll help you in that game.
And Kelly, if you ask one team that question, you might want to go ask the other team too, right?
Yeah, you never get the same answer from both coaches, I've learned.
Exactly. No, for sure. So okay. We've talked a little bit about hockey IQ and understanding some things, from a 30,000 foot level, but also, okay, we're still going to be on what are teams doing. So as whether we're linesmen or referees or we're working in the 2 official system, there are certain things that are going to happen on the ice that may provide us clues as to what we can anticipate potentially next. And as I talk about this, I'm going to lead in and I'm going to show a couple of videos here in a second, but JB, what are things that may happen on the ice in a game where all of a sudden as an official, our radar needs to go up that, and as was put in by one of our audience members, okay, a 2-on-1 is potentially going to lead to a play around the net. What other things do we need to be aware of that could lead to, say, a penalty, or say a close play at the blue line, or things like that, or a fast break? What are some things we need to be aware of in case they happen?
Penalty wise, a lot of times if our two most common calls, a restraining foul or an aggressive foul. Okay, restraining fouls happen when a team gets beat, or maybe they're not as fast, or they're just taking a bad angle on a player. And then now we've got to say, okay, how are they going to close that gap? Are they going to close it with using their feet, or are they going to close it with some other way, like hooking or tugging or grabbing? And hits, if you're in a checking level, hits can happen so quickly where it's hard to see, did he get him in the chin or not? Something along those lines. And a lot of that comes to how are they forechecking, or how are they defending? Are they in a bad position? I think a lot of hit from behinds. I would really love to believe that hockey players aren't out there trying to intentionally hit players from behind. I know it does happen. However, I think a lot of hit from behinds happen because they were caught, they were in a bad angle, they were in a bad position, and they end up, they're thinking I gotta get a piece of them, and if we can see that, that's kind of on a one-on-one level. Is a player beat, or is the defender in a bad position? Is the forechecking forward in a bad skating lane and they can't quite get to him? Then I start looking, how are they going to close this gap, or how is this hit going to develop?
Exactly. So I'm going to show you, as my technical assistant behind me, Stormy the cat, makes an appearance. I am going to show you, I'm going to put up a video here, JB, and I'd like you to break down a few clues here that we can see to help our audience kind of understand what we're talking about. So we'll do this. And I'm going to roll this tape, and then we'll kind of talk about it on the other side here. So what we end up seeing here is a holding penalty. Why did this holding penalty occur?
Right, and that's the thing I think that we're going to try to get across here. We could just show the clip and say, is this holding, yes or no? And I think the majority of people would say, yeah, that was holding. He pulled him down. Okay, so we just had a shot on net here. Looks like players in dark jersey are attacking. Okay, white's trying to break the puck out. Okay.
Well, I screwed this up. Keep going. Keep talking here, and I'll fast forward it.
So what white ends up breaking the puck out, but as the puck comes up along the wall here, you will see the attacking D pinch. Okay, and that's something you can identify early. How aggressive are the D in the offensive zone? And this is a long distance to pinch right here. The player's already coming out, so you could say the player breaking out, his toes are pointing up ice already. He doesn't have his back to him or anything. Okay, so we had a missed pinch. He just chipped around him, and now we've got a gap. Okay, we've got a situation where his teammate identifies that my teammate just got beat. We got a potential 2-on-1 here, so he is hustling, coming back. And, as the linesman, you got to see there that they're coming down on the wall. Okay. But he's starting to close his gap, which is fantastic. But I think this right here, okay, he caught up to him, but the player did use some body position on him a little bit. And this wasn't a high threat right here anymore, I don't think, because he did hustle, but he ended up pulling him down anyway. You know, as a coach, I'd be like, that's a terrible penalty for you to take. It's kind of lazy, kind of selfish. You did the great job of back checking the player like you should, but then once you caught up to him, you decided to wrap your arms around him and pull him down.
Right. So the kind of the takeaway here from this one is, you know, when we see a defenseman pinch and the team breaking out gets past that person, we now end up at the point to where we can not expect and not be ready, but yet ready to anticipate that potentially something could happen going down the wall or going the other direction because the defenseman is pinched and put himself in a situation where we have an odd man break, right? So if we recognize that defenseman pinches, that can be a clue as an official that maybe something's happening going the other way. And now we've turned into our 2-on-1 potentially. So we have a potential play on the net. We also have a potential penalty, right, Kelly?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So now one more. I'm going to throw up another video here, and Kelly, we'll let you kind of walk us through this one. So we'll let the play happen once, and then we'll stop and talk about it. So we're in White's defensive zone. And we end up with a holding penalty at the red line. So what are our clues here to see?
Oh, there we go. It's backing up. So here, I think our biggest clue is not just the pinch, but the turnover in this play. As you can see, the video got really small. The dark player is turning, he turns the puck over. At this point in time, the ref is looking and there's nine out of the 10 players on the ice are below the hash marks, right? So he's only worrying about those 9 players because the 10th player is alone on the blue line. So his kind of field of vision, he can see everybody just by standing where he's standing.
Right. And so that play then, as it moves up the ice, we've got all those players low. We have once again a turnover. Mm-hmm. And the puck comes up the ice, and that's where we're going to have our penalty. Correct. And so our turnover, you know, really in this situation, and I'm going to do this here. Our turnover is what's causing us to I'm not using my words well. The turnover is what's going to put our radar up and be ready that there might be some potential problems. And once again, you know, Kelly, from a linesman standpoint as well, turnovers, long stretch passes, teams that transition quickly, we've got to be aware of because of plays at the lines, right?
Yeah, those are things that everybody needs to be aware of on the ice, not just the referee for, you know, a potential infraction on the player who turned the puck over or, you know, their teammate, but also the linesmen that, you know, don't want to leave those naked lines out and have to kind of get a quick jump on to get to their lines.
Right. And, you know, and I think another thing that in USA Hockey in general, I mean, the officiating side, we're putting out these Zoom casts and they're really open to our entire membership. And we have people, I'm going to kind of plug the organization here for a second, but we have non-officials that watch these every week. We have players and coaches that watch these every week. Well, you know what, if we as officials take a look at some things that the coaching program is doing, we can learn some things as well, as we're still talking about what are teams doing that can help us understand stuff. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here because the coaching program has started putting out coaching clips on a regular basis. And for those of you in the audience that may not know this, USA Hockey has their own YouTube channel. So not only can you see these Zoomcasts on USA Hockey's Zoomcast page, but you can go to the YouTube channel. Additionally, if you go to the YouTube channel, you're going to see some coaching clips. So I'm going to run a coaching clip here that lasts about 2 minutes, And once again, for the audience, I want to plug what the coaches are doing, because if we took 2 or 3 minutes every week and see what they're putting out, I think we're all going to be better as officials. So you should all, and JB or Kelly, if you can confirm that you guys can see this YouTube channel on your screen.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna let this roll, and we'll just talk about it on the other side here.
And a team has to become adept at gaining possession of the puck. A player and a team has to become adept at gaining possession of the puck. While every player may have different go-to methods, one of the most important aspects of winning pucks is a player's ability to gain body position on the opponent. In this coach's clip, we will look at examples of players using their body to gain possession and why it's an important skill to implement into your practice plans. In our first clip, Green Bay number 8 steps in front of his opponent to gain possession of the puck. An errant pass finds its way to a USA player who is in a good position, taking control of the middle of the ice. In this clip, USA defender number 57 finds himself in a foot race with the Green Bay forechecker. Watch as he uses his body strategically to evade backside pressure, turn the puck up ice, and make an indirect breakout pass. Upon intercepting a cross-ice pass, Green Bay forward number 24 finds himself in a quick strike 2-on-2. He kicks the puck wide and center drives, trying to gain inside body position. This forces the US defender to honor him, as he has become a pass-tip option. The subtle excellence in this clip, however, belongs to the right defenseman for Team USA. He never forfeits the middle of the ice and uses his body to control the net front should a rebound transpire. In our final clip, we will be cueing in on Chicago forward number 19. He uses his body not once, but twice in heavy pressure to maintain possession long enough until support arrives. In today's game, gaining possession of the puck can happen in many different ways. Each individual player should use the best combination of his or her skills in order to be successful in this important aspect of play. Gaining body position and winning the space around a loose or questionable 50-50 puck is an important tool in a player's skill set and should be implemented into your practice plans.
So I'll stop sharing my screen here. So as we see that, like that's really well done. And certainly JB, as a USA hockey coach, I'm sure there's a lot you can take away from it from a coaching perspective. But what do you take away from something like that from an officiating perspective? What can our officials learn from on this clip?
Well, one of the things I think you see right away is players being taught what's the best way to protect the puck, right? And they showed the national development team in there, and I really enjoy watching that team because they're so well coached, and they're elite players obviously, but they do so many of the little things well, and their body positioning is to such that as soon as they gain a puck, it's almost guaranteed that their rear end is in your face. Okay, they protect the puck so well that way, and so we've got to be heads up on that. I don't think they're putting themselves in vulnerable position. I did see that question, and sometimes that does happen. It's a fast game, but what's the easiest way to win a puck? Checking level, body contact level. The easiest way to win a puck is get your butt in their face. Okay, I got to get my body between them. I got to keep the puck away from them. Okay, and so that's one tactic that players are using more and more, and we need to be aware of that. Okay, so what could collision, body check, or something incidental come out of that? And understanding that, hey, these are how players are being taught. I can anticipate that if I see a team who's really good at, especially we talk about cycle, working along the wall. You watch those teams, NHLers, I mean, butt and face. They've got their they've got their body shielding the puck and keeping the puck away from the opponent using their body, and they're strong on their skates that way and everything else. And so, okay, how is the defender going to react to that? Are they going to be pull? Are they going to hook? Are they just going to crash through them and they don't care? You know, putting the onus on the body checker. So that's one big takeaway just from that little clip right there that I think we can use.
In Kelly, so you know that's a really good educational 2.5-minute clip for officials. So let's take it. Okay, so that clip shows the national team development program, which are really high level, the best 17 and 18-year-old players we have in this country. Let's transfer it down now to the youth level or the grassroots level, whether it's U14 or, you know, a body checking level or a body contact level. You know, what are some things we can pick up on and some stuff that maybe our grassroots officials can pull from something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of just seeing the fundamentals of how players are taught, you know, whether it is at that high level or whether, you know, it's your mites and squirts that are in-house players. And, you know, as an official, it's sometimes you forget what the defenseman might be taught and, you know, whether like in the clip that we saw, the white defenseman was, you know, he was staying in his lane, skating backwards, like he was taught by his coach. And, you know, he didn't change his lane. So to us, knowing kind of how these defensemen are taught to play in their zone, you know, you can recognize that that's not interference, you know, whether his opponent falls or not, you know, he's maintained his lane. So another thing that I kind of thought of throughout that series of clips was the strength of players, right? That's obviously something that is probably more prevalent, you know, at the grassroots level is the different strengths and the sizes of players as they're, you know, growing up. So, you know, do you have one player who's really, really strong in his or her skates versus another player who might not be as strong on his or her skates? And that's something that we kind of need to take into account as officials, but recognizing, you know, just those fundamentals of how these players are taught to kind of, you know, use their bodies, I think is really important for us to, as from an officiating perspective, to kind of recognize, you know, what is a penalty versus what is, you know, a good clean play. And, you know, sometimes the line there is pretty fine and hard to determine, but I think, you know, seeing how these players are taught definitely makes it easier for us to kind of tell the difference.
Oh, for sure. And like they highlighted on that, the defenseman, I think it was maybe the second or third example with the play coming into the US zone. They highlighted the defenseman in the slot who did a good job of keeping his body in front of the attacking player.
Yeah.
If we can recognize those things as an official, you know what, we're going to be able to make better judgments. And you also highlighted, Kelly, and Frank brings this up in the chat and talks about players need to protect themselves. And there's no question that, you know, at every level of hockey, even at the National League level, there are times when players don't do a good enough job of protecting themselves. The onus is always at every level within USA Hockey. The onus is always on the player delivering the check. If it's a check from behind or a check to the head, the onus is always on that player that breaks those rules. And so we as officials, we also have to recognize if a player is going to get body position along the wall, that there are those potentials. And, you know, Kelly, one of the things we've talked about a lot here over the last little bit is anticipating what might happen. Can anticipation get us in trouble as well?
I think it definitely can. You know, kind of seeing something that's going to happen and jumping the gun, you know, seeing a player go after another player for, you know, a stick infraction like a trip or a slash, and you are pretty sure that player is going to fall and they don't fall. Things like that, where, you know, if you're anticipating, which is a good thing, but sometimes, you know, if you don't wait and let the play develop and kind of, you know, be sure of what you're calling, you can definitely get in trouble.
JB, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, you know, you got to let it play out a little bit. I was always taught you give it a pause, okay, and see what happens. And, you know, the one drawback may be that if something happens and one team screams and then all of a sudden the referee's arm is in the air, they think they talked him into that call. And I think most of the time they're just seeing how it's going to sort itself out afterwards. Okay. Rather than, and over anticipating and expecting a result when something else happens. So if you give that a little pause, especially on some of those plays before you make your decision, I think is absolutely a-okay.
And if we go back to our Zoomcast episode on some judgment things, we talk about a lot on the judgment Zoomcast. We talk about making sure we don't over anticipate, making sure we're calling good penalties and we're not calling cheap penalties, and that's where that pause comes in. But if a turnover happens, that doesn't automatically mean a holding penalty is going to occur, right? It just means that if a player is back checking and the attacker has a step on him, there's a potential, but we still need to make sure the news happens before we report it. We don't want to make the news with calling a bad penalty. While we're talking about this, I just got a really good really good question here, and Jason asks, "What's a respectable pause to make the call? I'm a second-year referee starting to learn to respect my judgment before the call. How long should I wait?" Either of you guys want to jump in and answer that question?
Yeah. One of the best answers I think I ever heard was from a baseball umpire. Give 2 chews of your gum before you make your call. I'm like, so what is that on a stopwatch? I don't know. 2 seconds, 2 seconds. It's hard to say, but I like that one, where umps, rather than, call them out or give the safe, 2 chews of the gum before you give your signal.
Kelly?
That's a good one. I don't have a rule of thumb, but usually just, long enough to take one deep breath and, not just let my arm go shooting straight up, but take that second to figure out exactly what I am going to call.
Yeah. And I think for the, for the question, Jason, one thing we tell our officials as they're developing, take your time, make sure you get it right. It's not going to be the same on every penalty. It might be 2 chews of the gum. It might be a half a chew. And as you continue to officiate as a young new official, that pause might be a little bit less. And, when we talk about communication, if all of a sudden, you take that second, Kelly, and now a coach wants to say, well, it took you so long. What happened? What's a good response to that coach that says you waited too long to call that penalty?
Just say, coach, I wanted to get it right. I saw it. I knew what I was going to call, and, I'm confident in my call.
Yeah. So we want it ultimately, JB, and as a coach, if the official says my ultimate goal is to get that call right, it took me a second to make sure I was getting the right call. As a coach, you're going to be satisfied with that answer, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's an honest answer too. Honesty is important.
No, for sure. So, okay, so we spent some time talking about the game and talking about clues and tips and things like that. Let's talk a little bit about hockey IQ and understanding how our actions on the ice from that 30-foot level are going to help us get from the opening faceoff to the end of the game well, where everybody's going to be happy. And judgment's an important part of that, right, JB? We have to understand and what we do early in the game is going to have an effect late in the game, right? And what do you think about when we talk about hockey IQ in terms of judgment? And this can go for face-off standards, this can go for icings, our icing judgment, and our penalty standard or plays around the net. How does that affect everything?
Well, 2 thoughts right away. Number one, the whole effort here is to help you make the correct calls and grab the good ones. So as we move up through levels here, if I'm a level 1 new official or level 2, or I've only got a couple of years experience, you're typically working at a level where you're still a teacher. So you got to teach them what's right and what's wrong. Not a whole lot of management going on. I think a lot of what we're talking about here becomes more applicable as you move up through the U12, U14, U16, and so on. Because now you're starting to manage a game better. And, you know, we can go out and say, all right, make sure you grab all the good ones and leave the bad ones alone. Okay, that's easy to be said and hard to do. So if we start viewing things, not just from our officials standpoint, but understanding the game from a player's perspective, understanding from a coach's perspective, when you get to another level from the general manager or owner's perspective or the commissioner's perspective. And rather than just viewing things through our officiating lens and becoming more of a hockey person than just a hockey official, I think that's going to help us out there. And, you know, you got to remind me your question again, because I forgot my second part.
That's okay. I'm going to ask Kelly the same question, then we'll come back to you. So,
Perfect.
you know, Kelly, what, you know, when we talk about setting the standard earlier, we talk about, you know, doing things that are going to help us get from the beginning of the game to the end of the game well. You know, what are some things officials should think about, whether they're a referee or a linesman or working in the two official system or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you know, maintaining a consistent standard throughout your game is the goal, right? And I think that starts with your first call, you know, whether you're a referee or a linesman, getting that first penalty out of the way and setting the standard so that everybody knows, you know, what's going to be called throughout the game. You know, having that first offsides or icing or face-off violation call as a linesman kind of, you know, lets the players know that that's how the game's going to go, and that's how you're going to call it when you're out there. So I think that setting the tone with your first call basically just, you know, sets you up for the rest of the game. You don't want to get into the, you know, the second period halfway through a game where you haven't called the penalty yet, or, you know, you might have called a soft trip during the first few minutes of the game. And from there, you don't really know where to go, because you can either, you know, maintain that standard throughout the game and you not be happy with the calls that you've made, or you can kind of back off. And then in that sense, you know, the players don't really know exactly what you're going to be calling. So it's harder in that sense. So I think just, you know, starting with that first strong call and setting the tone, whatever tone it is or whatever standard it is that you're going to set for that game, is definitely the way that I go about it.
So JB, we have to recognize as officials what we're doing early in the game, and that how that affects the game later. And that, you know, the magic word that we talk about all the time and everybody wants is consistency, right? So as officials, we have to be good enough, and even for linesmen, in terms of your judgment on line changes for too many men or your judgment on icings, we have to recognize that we want to be consistent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important. You set a good standard at the beginning of the game, whether it's your penalties or how you're going to conduct face-offs, or you know, you with icings and offsides. You know, icings, offsides, they should always be black and white, regardless of the time in the game. It's always easier to let up a little bit as the game goes along, and it's a very difficult to try grabbing back if you haven't started with a good standard from the beginning.
So we've got to recognize that you, as an official, you have to be, and this is really hard. We've had some comments here from some new level ones or second year officials, and it's harder to recognize this, but you have to really be a good self-critic during a game, right, Kelly? I mean, I'm going to guess you've had some opportunities in your career where you might say, okay, that first penalty or that penalty I called earlier in the game, I don't want to maintain that standard. So I'm going to have to readjust. Or there might be something you look at later in the game and you say, I haven't called that early in the game, so I'm not going to all of a sudden go outside of my lane and create something that the teams aren't expecting, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to JB's point, I think it's definitely harder to rein it in. You know, if you find the game's getting out of control, you know, obviously something has gone wrong prior to that. Either, you know, you didn't call penalties that maybe you should have called or that you might normally call. But, I've definitely learned the hard way that by the time it kind of does get out of control, it's much, much harder to rein it back in, to kind of, reset your standard from that point on. So it's definitely important to kind of set that tone early.
Oh, for sure. And we've got a really good question here, and it says, and the question is, if there are no infractions that fit your standard in the first period, how do you set the standard for the later periods? So you've officiated, you're working in the first period, and there's no penalties. And we always want to call good penalties. We don't want to make penalties up. We don't want to call marginal or phantom penalties. So what happens if there's no good penalties in the first period, JB? What are we doing then?
You know what? That's a great question, because your first good penalty call is critical. So it could be that they haven't done anything yet, and your attention has to stay up. Okay. Or let's say there was a trip call that was blatantly obvious. As official yourself, you say, all right, you made your first call, but that wasn't the first good one. You want to have that first good one where you really put the line in the sand. Okay. And if it comes later in a game, so be it. But you've got to be ready for that good first one. And if it's not there, it's not there. You're still waiting. You're still watching. You're still being attentive to all these other little things we're talking about, and you go from there. So that first one is very important.
And Kelly, okay, so we're waiting for that first one. Have you ever been in the situation where that one's not good enough, and now that one's not good enough, and that one's not good enough, and maybe they all actually were good enough, but they didn't kind of meet where you were, and now halfway through the game, maybe nothing looks like a penalty, right? So once again, we have to go back to a little bit of self-analysis and being able to recognize those things, right?
Yeah, I think it's, I had that this past weekend. We had no penalties in the first period, and 5 minutes into the third period, my arm shot up, and I was like, all right, I guess that's going to be, my standard. That's the penalty I'm comfortable calling. And, everybody kind of settled in from there. But I think, obviously not making up infractions, and you don't have to deviate from your standard. If there's no penalties in that first period, then you don't have to call a penalty in the first period. But kind of just, taking that moment to recognize your standard is totally fine to do, and to kind of make sure you're sticking to that. You don't have to make up penalties that aren't there, and you don't have to call a penalty in the first period if there aren't any. So no pressure to do that.
And no, you're right. I think the other thing is, and JB, over your time, your teammates on the ice, your fellow officials can help you with that too, right? You're going to have opportunities, whether it's in between periods or whatnot, and sometimes your partners are going to be more comfortable enough with you to say, hey, JB, you know what? Maybe it's time to wake up here because this game's going off the rails or whatnot. But as teammates, we can help each other out on the ice too with whatever, and say, hey, am I consistent? And getting that feedback. That's an important part of working as a team on the ice, right?
Yeah. One of the things I think of right away is whether I was a beginning official working with a more experienced crew, or even when I was the more experienced, if I saw something and maybe I didn't have quite the sight line, or a player skate in front of me or something, and I kind of been like, that looked like it should have been something. And, I'm in a 2 official system and my partner's got their arm up. I'm up 99% of the time. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Okay. And that comes from a little bit, we're talking about views you get. The good officials have a split screen view in their head. They know what they can see on the play, and they know what their partner can see as well. And that takes some practice. And, it's we're talking about a lot of stuff, the mental side of officiating, but that takes a lot of practice, knowing, okay, this is my view on the play, and I can also understand what my partner's view on the play is too.
And Kelly, we have another question here, another comment that, how do we deal with that player that's continually walking the line and maybe committing marginal penalties, or what we might call a minute and 30-second penalties when a penalty is actually 2 minutes in our game, and they're doing it over and over again. And at the lower levels, an official's very much a coach or an educator on the ice. How do we draw that line in the sand? How is our hockey IQ, our ability to work our way through a game, how are we going to work with that?
Yeah, I mean, in that instance, I think communication is definitely your best tool, right? You talk to that player, you be honest with them and tell them, I see what you're doing. Like, I saw X, Y, and Z. Be careful, like things like that, and either they're going to listen to you or they're not. And if they don't listen to you and they continue to kind of, play like that and things like that, don't be afraid to penalize them. Because that's how they're going to learn ultimately. Is nobody wants to sit in the penalty box for 2 minutes and penalize their team. So if you try communicating with them and kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt and telling them, hey, I really don't want to give you a penalty right now. I know you don't want to be in the penalty box. And if they don't listen to that, then don't be afraid to call the penalties that you see and work with them that way.
No, excellent. And, another thing you can do is also have a quick conversation with the coach, right, JB? You're a coach. If an official comes up and says, hey, can you please have a conversation with, number 12? He's getting a little too grabby with his free hand and I don't want to have to give him a holding penalty. You're going to address that, right? You're going to appreciate that conversation or that comment?
Right. Absolutely. And that's fantastic because, when you think about the good officials, not only they have good judgment and all those other skills, but they're good communicators. And so people aren't confused by calls they're making. So that's giving them a little heads up. And with a player, I can give a very specific example of communicating. We're getting into communication now, and you said this all ties together, which I think is fantastic. But let's say you got your 6'4" D in front of the net, and he's just beefing guys in front of the net every time they come close to the crease. Okay, and you haven't quite called it. It's hey, 17. Hey, you played hard nose. I like that. Okay, in fact, you remind me of the way I used to play. I like that. Can you do me a favor? Keep your stick down. Okay, that's a lot more effective than, hey, meathead, keep your stick down or you're getting penalty. And that's a communication thing to say, hey, I'm watching, I see, but you kind of greased them a little bit, hey, I like the way you play. I like aggressive hockey. Do me a favor, keep your stick down.
And I can say, JB, as I've known you for the better part of those some odd years you've been officiating, and you've never been 6'4". So, I could say that you might have been bad with the stick, but you've never been 6'4". You know what? I think as we head here towards the top of the hour and we begin to wrap this up, we've had some really good discussion tonight, talking about hockey IQ, learning a little bit, hopefully, about things teams are doing to help us, and then some things on the officiating side. Kelly, any final comments or anything you want to offer to the audience here?
No final comments. Just thank you guys for coming, and I learned a lot on this Zoomcast, so I hope you guys did too.
Awesome. And for the birthday boy, JB Olson, at least that's what our audience seems to think here. We can't confirm or deny it. Any final comments?
He's a little bit early. My birthday is tomorrow.
Oh,
so a little bit early. But yeah, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. No, the one thing I just wanted to end with is just say, hey, just keep learning. The game is changing and the game's evolving. And I think as officials, we need to evolve along with it. And the more we can understand the game from all viewpoints, the better we're going to be as an official.
That's great. And as we always do here at the end, I want to showcase what our upcoming Tuesday night lineup is going to be. Next Tuesday, we have an episode on competitive contact. So talking about all things related to competitive contact. Matt Leaf will be in this chair, in the captain's chair, with a couple of our ADM managers to talk about that. Then Tuesday, April 13th, I'll be back with a couple other people talking about the Junior Officiating Development Program, which I'm fortunate enough to to manage for USA Hockey. We'll kind of talk about everything that is involved with that program. And then finally, our final episode of the season before we go on a little bit of a summer break is BJ Ringrose is coming back with You Make the Call Live every Friday on our social media channels. One of the most popular things in the USA Hockey social media lineup is BJ throws out a clip and you make the call. And thousands of people respond every week and view. And so they're going to have a little bit of fun on the 20th doing You Make the Call Live. So those are going to be our final 3 episodes here before we take a little bit of a summer break. Want to thank not only Kelly and JB for joining us this evening, but also want to thank you at home for being a part of our Zoomcast. We wish you all a good week and look forward to seeing you again on coming episodes. So take care, everyone. Bye for now.